again, with the whole not being shown or kind of told what certain characters are saying. You mentioned earlier about the way that the movie kind of skips around a bit. There was a scene when when Franz first decides that he's not going to pledge allegiance to Hitler. There's a scene where he then is sent to the higher up, the next guy up in charge. He's put in chains, and then he's sent to the higher up guy in charge, and it's almost like he's going to have a meeting with that guy, and then it just cuts, and he's being sent to prison.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate that. Yeah, we can figure out what's going to happen, and most of the stuff that the movie decides to pass on is things that we could easily figure out for ourselves. I mean, the audience, we're not stupid. We can figure these things out, but it's kind of it does hurt the film because it makes me wonder why. Okay, if this movie is so simple that you don't even need to have dialogue and scenes, you're not going to spend any time establishing these characters and who they are to Franz and Fanny, these people that they live with in the town, and the other officers, the other Nazis, the other prisoners. If you're not really going to spend any time at all and really getting into them, you're just going to tar them with all the same brush that, okay, these are all just enemies of the state. Don't worry about what they might have, what anything else that they might have done to get them there, to get them put in that prison or anything. Don't worry about any of that. Don't worry about any of the reasons that the other people in town are turning on Fanny and Franz. Don't worry about any of that. It's just like, for you to gloss over all that, it really makes me wonder, well, then why did you need to make this movie 3 hours long? It reminded me a bit of, just in some ways, it kind of reminded me a bit of Passion of the Christ, where I think originally Mel Gibson, he wanted to just make that movie with no English subtitles at all. And when people, there was some hubbub about that, and people were asking why would you do that? And I think Mel Gibson had said that he figured that everybody already kind of knew the story, and they'd be able to figure the story out, and figure where we are at the story without actually reading subtitles to know what the characters are saying. And I think it was Russell Crowe said, well, then what's the point of making the movie? If we can figure all this out for ourselves, what's the point?
Yeah.
I think that some of the issues that this movie had really do come from the style that Terrence Malick has decided to approach the story with. Like, I really would have liked to have known more about Franz and why he really was the conscientious objector that he was, when everybody else in the town that he comes from is not. Where everybody else is all, Heil Hitler, death to the outsiders and all that stuff. But Franz himself is really, he's sickened by it. He doesn't understand it, and I don't think the movie really gets that across. I believe in real life he was a devout Catholic, and he spent a lot of time in the church, and it really did come from his own sense of morality, that it was just he wasn't going to pledge himself to the Hitler. He wasn't going to pledge himself to the military, to killing other people and doing all this stuff. I believe that's in real life, that's what motivated the man to show to defy Hitler and all. But in this movie, it really is just kind of the same kind of glossing over of things. It feels like, well, obviously he would not want to pledge allegiance to Hitler because he's Hitler.
Yeah.
You know? But that's looking at this from a 2020 perspective, not a living in Austria in the 1930s or 1940s perspective.
Yeah, you don't get a lot of character insight for stuff like that at all. Like when you compare what Franz does here to the character in Hacksaw Ridge. In Hacksaw Ridge, the character makes the big comment at the start that he's not going to go to war because because of his religious beliefs, he doesn't believe in shooting anybody. Like to him, it's still murder. and goes against the Ten Commandments.
And in that, he did want to go, in that movie, the character did want to go and fight, and not fight, he wanted to go and serve his country.
Yeah.
But it was kind of that, but he didn't want to, it was that kind of torn between wanting to serve his country and not wanting to kill anybody, not wanting to touch a weapon.
Yeah.
But in this, you just weren't given anything.
And likewise here, we're not 100% sure why the town turns on Fanny. Is it because the other women are angry that their husbands have gone off, potentially to die, whereas hers is not going off, like, for a while at the start of the movie? Or is it because they do believe in the cause that Hitler is pushing, and they find it offensive that they're not going? Like, that's one of the things that you don't know. And you also don't know kind of almost like how they were seen in the village before that. There's a great sketch by the D-Gen where they've got guys coming back from the Vietnam War, and they're talking about, like, suffering from post-traumatic stress and stuff like that. And this guy says, oh, when I got back from Vietnam, people were spitting on me, they were throwing stuff at me and everything. And they say to him, oh, is that because because you came back from Vietnam? And he goes, oh, no, that's because I was a ticket inspector. Like, that kind of thing could be a real change. Like, maybe Franz and Fanny were never really close to the people in the village in the first place. Like, maybe they were, like, almost like outsiders. You don't get that, like, set out for you. So, yeah, that's the things that kind of frustrated me with this. But then at the same time, this movie looks so beautiful. Like, the scenery and everything that Terrence Malick manages to capture in this movie. His style at times in the prison actually works really well because it makes it really intimate. Like, there's a lot of war movies where they have prisons and everything is always a group shot, and you don't get that feeling of isolation and everything. Whereas with this movie, Terrence Malick has plenty of shots of, like, Franz almost losing his mind in his cell because he's so lonely. And, like, there's one scene where he just wants to look out the window for a second, like, to see where he is. And he goes to look out the window and a guard catches him and comes in and gives him an absolute hiding. It's those kinds of scenes that that work in this movie, because you do get a general feeling about what it was like in a Nazi prison, and that's not something that's been explored a lot over the years. Like, we've seen with, like, a comedy television series that was based in a Nazi prison for prisoners of war, but to actually see a movie set in a Nazi prison for other Germans and other Austrians who have refused to fight for Hitler, that's something that we have very, very seldom seen in cinema. So it is a very important story to be told.
Yeah, it definitely. I think the entire movie kind of uses this sort of fisheye lens kind of thing, where it really, it in the prison scenes, it feels really claustrophobic and really close up, and then in the outside in the village, it's really. The scenery, the locations, the mountains behind, like cloudy mountains, kind of like something from Lord of the Rings, and it's just really it's really ugly and uncomfortable at times, but it's also really beautiful at other times, which was interesting. Like at the start, their happiness in the village and their happiness in their own life, and before what comes along and pretty much destroys their livelihoods. I think something again with the I guess jumping around a little bit. The way that we're shown, like how horrific it is in the prison. Most of this movie, I believe, is taken from letters between Franz and Fanny, and in real life. And so there's a lot of that throughout the movie, of Franz writing to Fanny and Fanny writing to Franz. And I didn't really know that going into this movie. And so the way that it introduces that idea with, like, dear loving wife, and I thought the point was that This is what Franz would be telling his wife if he was allowed to write a letter to her, and this is what Fanny would be telling her husband about what was going on with her if she knew where he was. Because at times the movie seems to be lost between just exactly how bad it is in the prison. It's just like at one point, it's like it's a gulag, pretty much. Like he's been sent to the dungeons, and so they still have a mail call in there. Like you don't really see him getting mail when he's in prison or sending it out when he's in prison, but Fanny keeps getting his letters. Yeah. Like there were little things like that just felt a little weird. Like the movie is kind of built up around the correspondence between the two protagonists, but the world that we're presented with, I'm just not quite sure exactly how that would have worked. Like as well, like we're shown a lot because as you say, there was a bit of repetitiveness. Like, I don't know, man, after about the third or fourth time that it keeps cutting back to Fanny being mistreated in her home village, I got a bit tired of it. And and there was a lot of Franz being beaten or seeing other people being beaten for minor infractions or no infractions at all in the prison. But then later on, Franz runs into another soldier who he actually met during his training earlier in the film, and it's like, okay, all of a sudden he's allowed to wander around with this guy, and he's allowed to talk with him, and he's able to be friendly with this guy, whereas before it hinted at the idea that basically if the prisoners were talking to each other, they'd get the end of a club.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of that going on. I will say that the way that the movie is shot is really effective, though. Like I said, it's beautiful at times and it's ugly at others. And the odd, almost again, this whole non-traditional way that Terrence Malick films a movie. Kind of the shots, like half the time the characters feel like they're not really in frame. And it really does put you right in the middle of it almost.
Yeah.
Like you're standing with these characters while you're in these uncomfortable positions, or you're almost overhearing these conversations that people are having. So some of it was really effective, but other parts, just I thought it was a bit disconnected at times.
Yeah, I thought that the acting in this was absolutely top-notch as well. I thought there was some amazing acting in here. It's also, because of how long it's taken Terrence Malick to edit this movie, it has turned into the final film for Bruno Ganz and Michael Enquist as well, to hit the cinema. What did you think of their performances in this film, now that this is basically going to be considered their final film?
I thought that they were really great in it. Bruno Ganz, I think one of his... It's ironic because one of his most well-known roles is playing Adolf Hitler in Downfall.
Yeah.
And this is a movie where, again, he's playing another Nazi officer, but almost has like a sense of morality to him. It's one of the few scenes in the movie where you see Franz talking to a Nazi officer, and the Nazi officer isn't just yammering at him in a foreign language, because again, it doesn't matter what he's saying. It's one of the few performances from one of the evil characters in this movie that actually we're allowed to hear what he has to say. And I thought that he gave a really great performance in that kind of small role. Michael Nyqvist, I really do love that guy. I really miss him, and it's crazy, like, this is like 3 years since his death, and there's still another movie with him coming out. I thought it was weird enough last year when Hunter Killer came out, and he was in that.
Yeah.
But, he had a great part in it as well, but to be honest, I didn't even realize it was him until afterwards, because just the way that the scene is filmed and how short it is. He plays a bishop that Franz goes to when he talks to his priest about his feelings on not being really seeing eye to eye with the Nazi Party and what he should do. And his priest